In the fall of 2007, I attended a lecture at Manhattan College on the genocide in Darfur and had the honor of hearing Mrs. Toby Kirsh speak. While she spoke briefly of her experiences in World War II, she focused instead on the importance of being active to end the genocide and continuing human rights violations in Darfur. I was moved by the story of her experiences as a resistance fighter in Belgium and inspired by her activist approach to life. Shortly after that lecture, I began working with the Manhattan College Holocaust Resource Center and was given the opportunity to interview Mrs. Kirsh. The goal of this video is twofold. First, Mrs. Kirsh, myself, and the Holocaust Resource Center hope that by recording the memories of survivors such as Mrs. Kirsh, we can work to end Holocaust denial. Second, we hope that by hearing Mrs. Kirsh speak of her and her husband's efforts in the Belgian resistance, individuals will be inspired to become active when encountering injustice, however large or small that injustice may be. In one of our unrecorded conversations, Mrs. Kirsh reiterated to me the slogan of the resistance, saying, "We must keep our eyes open. Do not let anything go ignored because you think it is too small or insignificant." 60 years later, one finds Mrs. Kirsh standing up at public forums, such as those at Manhattan College, speaking and personifying her ideal that life is a struggle and one must fight every day. It is only by truly embodying these words that we can hope to make the phrase, "never again," a reality.
I was born in 1911 in Warsaw, but I didn't stay too long I emigrated to Belgium, and I considered it more my country. In 1933, Hitler came to the power, and there was anxiety, but nobody thought, at that time I lived in Belgium, right? And there were some German Jews who came because they felt harassed. And when we talked to them, they said, "Okay, well, it will pass 3 months, 6 months, we'll go back." I really didn't understand their attitude, because if you think that it's going to take 3 or 6 months, you stay there and you help it happening. But that's the way they were seeing it. They marched in Brussels on my husband's birthday, May 10th. So I can't forget that. That's when we started getting scared, because France was fighting. After 17 days, they laid down the arms, and we were really very disappointed. After all, France is not a little country, it's a powerful country. Okay, Germany is but 17 days, so that was the first time that we were aware when we saw that they were losing. And then 3 days they were in Brussels. It was like a promenade, Of course, a lot of Belgian youngsters died in fighting, but it didn't take. Once they laid down the arm, they took off the uniforms, and this was the original group who formed the resistance. My husband and I forgot to tell you, I met him in Brussels. he came also from Poland to study, and he had to interrupt his study because immediately as the Germans walked in, everything changed, all the laws, everything. And so, he and I worked as, and we were members of a labor union. It was a socialist, by the way, so it wasn't religious or anything. There was no problem with being Jewish or whatever. I think I never understood how they really knew who was Jewish, because in Belgium there was no discrimination, that maybe by the names or something, they put their hand on every official, the studies, let's say the city officers, and wrote letters to most of the people telling them that they can't live anymore in Belgium, but not to worry, they're sending them to some country and not mentioning where, that they will have colonies there and live together, not be bothered, not bother anybody else, something of that sort. It sounded not innocent, but to me certainly not very kosher, And with the children, doesn't matter, just take whatever they have and go. And there was a big place in Brussels, and we looked and we saw this. I said, they're crazy, going with small children on a long trip without, and I don't know exactly if they had them leave their money but they came, they assembled, and they left and never came back. But then when people began to be a little smarter and started hiding with Gentile friends or in an attic, somebody just protected them, or, that, or like my husband and many others joined the resistance. We felt that the big city was the most dangerous place. And it was. That's where they first made some edits, laws right away. You had to come and change your identity card to put a J, and which we never did, and put on armbands with with the Star of David, And we were thinking, we said, well, there were already, of course, words about concentration camps and this and that. So personally, like myself and my husband and some of our friends said, well, we're not going to just go like sheep to the slaughter. We go to hide, to fight, to do something. And we had a lot of Belgian Gentiles friends, personal, and they said some of them joined, and so they sort of invited my husband, and he said good, and I went along, and they said they'll find a place for me to hide, to do something. For a while, I was just living there, but we went out in a region called the Ardennes. That's where the Battle of the Bulge was. the river, the boat runs there. So we went to that place and joined the resistance. It was an armed resistance. My husband never had a gun before, but he was trained there. And we slept in the woods and by friends, by this, by that. That was 41. The Belgian people had very bad experience with World War I, and they weren't really that in love with the Germans. So we always hoped they're not going to snitch on the vessel, you know. And we found people who were willing to keep me and somebody else, you know, a few people. Plus I had my best friend, a Belgian, a Gentile from Brussels, and she said she's going to come with me. She sort of felt protecting me, you know, not that it would make any difference to the Germans if I had a Belgian friend or not. And then we heard that in Britain they were bombing constantly on them. It was something awful. That the British, I don't know if it was the government or some organization, that decided to evacuate the children from London. So that whatever happens, let's put the children in safe places in the country, someplace, disseminated all over. And I said, well, that's a good idea. We could do the same in Brussels. And I started with this friend. We contacted a few people who were of the same mind, and we not, you know, people are strange, you know, you have so many different emotions. Parents didn't want to give up their children, they would hiding with them, but we had to explain. Some were very willing right away. They thought it's a good idea. Even if we don't survive and would get caught, at least our children, they would give us names, addresses of relatives, some in Brazil, some here. They said, if we are gone, that's where you go with children. If the children survive, if you survive. The kids that we had were like 7, 8 years. They could not really understand, but they trusted their parents that they could come with us and be careful in the train. We didn't have cars or other means of transportation, and we brought them to, we already had places where the people expected them, you know. They said, we'll take a girl, we'll take a boy, we'll take this age or that age.
How did you and the woman that you worked with find the families to?
Oh, I don't, you know, sometimes I think, how did it happen? She knew people, I knew people, they knew us, they probably heard of our work, and they contacted us. One day, believe me, we were pretty scared. We went on a train to take a little boy, and he looked sort of Jewish. He wasn't blonde and blue eyes, which is, of course, there are plenty of blonde and blue eyed Jews too. But he was with me and her. But she was a Gentile, a blonde, a blue-eyed, beautiful woman. And we went in the train, and there was a couple of German guys, and we were trembling in our boots. And she said to me, my name was Yvette, and we had false papers and all that. She says, Yvette, you take care of the boy, I'll take of the German. And she sort of was flirting with them, disgustingly, but she did. And one of them took out a picture and showed his fiancée, looked exactly like she is. Really, a blonde, blue-eyed, sort of. And they were laughing, the soldiers with her and things. And thank goodness they left before we did. We were further. My role was to transport children from Brussels to people who were willing to shelter them during the war. Because a woman was less in danger without a child by her, you know. And some of them, children really survived thanks to being there because the parents perished. Some were lucky that the parents were safe too. But this was, and I must say that the people there, the farmers, they were so good. One girl was, I don't remember her name, she's in Brazil now, must be 60 years old or something. We didn't keep up much with anybody because we were too busy with ourselves. So she came with us, but when she came to the house there, she was very disappointed. She came from a nice middle-class family with a piano and things, and here it was like, were actually farmers. And they had, I think, 7 children, and they were ready to accept an 8-year-old. And she was hanging on to us, she wouldn't stay. And we had a real problem. And I said, we have to take her back. I don't know where we're going. I came up on an idea. I said, at least give us 2 weeks. They are nice people. You probably will like them, and the children will like you because they right away accepted you. And don't look, it is not going to be easy for you, we understand. But right now, I don't have a place, I'm in a hiding myself. You must give us 2 weeks, we're going to look for another place which might be more suitable to you, or will bring you back to your mother or something. So she agreed. And when we came 2 weeks later, she said, I'm so happy here, they're so nice with me. They really went out of their way. The lady of the house hugged her and kissed her, and, you know, she understood. The only thing was that the church, they were every Sunday they went to church, and she didn't care, she went along, you know. Some children are very religious and they wouldn't. And then one day, one of the kids had, what do you call,
Communion?
huh?
Communion?
A communion, yeah. And she wanted to be too in it. I said, well, it is not your religion and thing, and you cannot do that. The priest wouldn't allow you. He's asking, so he said, no, we can't do that unless your mother and father would say that they are converting you. You cannot do that. And again there was a dilemma. What are we going to do? She was crying and think her best friend, she wants to be with her. So the mother said, I have a plan. We'll buy you the same dress she has, and you'll be an escort. One boy we placed in a convent, and at the end of the war he was grabbed. Somebody snitched and said that when they came, were running away, they poked their noses all over, and they found him there and shot him rather. No discussion, no nothing. He's Jewish, gone. Okay, this is one of not very happy memories, you know. The men, mostly like my husband, they did the sabotage, the railroads, the things. So, and we were trying to be close by. Sometimes weeks passed by, we didn't see each other, but we had news that they do, you know, was like, I don't know, like email or something. We were kept, you know, au courant of what's going on. They had a réseau of information underground, you know, and they got money from the Americans or from Belgium that were in England, and they were parachuting money and instructions because they also had some information. It wasn't just you and me, it was an organized group. And they were not always in the same place. They were going from one village to another, where not to be too much seeing, you know, but mostly they had arms, and the sabotage actions was the most important, so that they stopped them from doing things, you know, especially at the time when the liberation started. They certainly were, and that's when my husband distinguished himself. When the Americans came in, the whole village, actually it was a little city, and the mayor, everybody, we said we'll make them a banquet. And I'll never forget one of the officers there or somebody in the village had a beautiful house with a room long like this with a table, and we all put in our help. I think she slaughtered a veal or something and made a beautiful banquet. Okay. It was so joyous, and we kissed our soldiers, and they were overwhelmed. For them, it was not the end yet, you know. Until from this place, they had to go to Berlin. It took them several months. But, you know, they were, any little village they conquered and things, you know, and didn't have any victims, they were happy. In the middle of this, somebody came in running and telling that there's a group of other soldiers, black people. So there was still room at the table, and I said, we're going to invite them. And this officer said no. I said, why? He said, because we don't mix with black people. That's it. I said, why? I can't understand that. He says, well, it's difficult for you to understand, but that's the way it is in the United States. I said, so why do they come to fight here? I said, come out in the field. There's white snow, and you'll see if the black people's blood is any other color. That he was very embarrassed, and he was glad that his soldiers didn't understand. He said, let's not talk about it. We have a task to accomplish, and that's it. We are not to judge. And I thought to myself, well, that's the problem with the whole world. Nobody judges, and they tell you do it, and you do it. Isn't that something? There were also probably, but the mayor's wife already had prepared dishes, and she was serving them out in the street. She said, what can we do? That's their customs, that's their, we not. But I never could understand that. Well, I really never wanted to come to the United States, because once we were liberated, there wasn't any reason for us, because even if our apartments were emptied out and things, the government was, as soon as we came back to Brussels, we got an apartment and some really ridiculous furniture, but it was a table, a bed, we were, and that wasn't just because we were resistance, because we were refugees, because everything was taken. There was, so I didn't think of going, but as soon as we came back to Brussels, my sister, she already knew that I was alive, and she had left letters on my old address, and we started corresponding. And she said, and then she found out that nobody else was survived, and she says, why don't you come? We heard, which was true, that they gave out visas far in between. I said, okay, let's go. And by this time, Estelle was like 2, 3 years old. Yeah, she came with us, and we registered for a visa. Well, I didn't give it a thought. 3 months later, we got a visa. And that was, we understood, because Belgium is not a country from which people emigrate. They gave us 3 months' time to get ready. We didn't know. In the meantime, I got pregnant. Everything kept. So I spoke to my sister, actually. I said, look, I'm pregnant. I don't feel like I want, and I only have 3 months. Come on, you have the baby here. We'll be an American. I said, one will be Belgian, one will be American. She said, don't worry about that. We don't make a big difference here. And she said, and if it's a boy, he can become president if he's born here. I'll never forget, we were joking. I said, okay, we'll come. In the meantime, we couldn't go anymore because they wouldn't take us on a plane with the last minute. So we had to take a boat, which was very clever because it was like a trip, a beautiful voyage. I can't remember the name of the boat was Europa. Yeah, I think it was an Italian boat. And we were 9 days from Brussels to New York. When I came, a month later, I gave birth to my younger daughter. One was born in Brussels, the one here. And, and you know, it wasn't easy in 1950 here to get a job and this and that. I moved right away to this community because the union, the labor union, was connected with this co-op. So they told us, you address yourself, they will help you. My sister, of course, helped us a lot. We were 3 months in her apartment with her. She was the oldest, I was the youngest, very strange. I was very disappointed because at that time I felt there was still a lot of anti-Semitism here and discrimination against the black. People told me that if you went to a small hotel, they had cards all over. Blacks and Jews are not welcome. Yeah, you don't know that. You are a kid. That was 62 years ago. It took a long time until we got to this point, and it's still not completely desegregated, especially in a small southern town. You see the whole to-do they make now with Obama because he is black. They don't consider what he is as a person or the program he has, but that's the underlying thing. The Jews said, never again, never again, never again. How many genocides did we have since the Holocaust? You have this Darfur, which is a shame of the world, and it continues. They could do something about it. I always felt sort of almost ashamed that we weren't more numerous to fight, because a lot of people, when I saw in Brussels, when they called the Jews together, and I saw people with babies in their arms, I said, they are crazy. They go no matter where. And we already had heard a little bit about the camps and things. And I felt that there should have been many, many more people. There should be no stop of talking about what happened, and that in the worst of circumstances, there is always something you can do. Don't give up. See, well, I don't want to say preach, but talk about it, or tell your children. Did I ever tell you the story of court?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's an amazing story.
I mean, there's so much can be done constantly. People get tired, they say it's an obsession. It is an obsession, because if you lived even not in a concentration camp, but if you were harassed for 5 years and you lost your whole family and you've seen the horrors, you don't want to see it again. He said, anything is better. Let's talk, 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 talk. We shouldn't spend our energy and money and everything on wars, on weapons. There's always things can be improved without the wars.